Ramesh is here, so we'll just give him a moment to join us. But great to have all of you with us here today, and thank you for taking the time. I know it's going to be an enlightening session. So let's dive right in. Himani, let me start off with you. You know, AI is only as powerful as the infrastructure behind it. So how do you see connectivity, computing power, all of that coming together for the, as forces behind what we're able to deliver here in India?
So if you just look at how the pace of change has happened with AI in last few years, and especially starting with 2022 when ChatGPT was launched, it's really, really unprecedented. And if you look at it, it is because of the compounding growth of compute, first of all, and which is the infrastructure backbone or the foundational Lego block that's there. Second, it is all about the models which have grown so rapidly, whether it is about LLMs, SLMs, tiny models, vertical models, horizontal models, and what you have. Third, about the software optimization. So if you look at the compounding growth of all of these three curves, that has what has led to the growth that is there. And infrastructure is not just the backbone, it is not just the foundation, but it is actually the multiplier. Multiplier to create the frontier firms, but it needs to be really complemented with the skills, the future talent who will be able to use it, and that's why I say the skilling and infrastructure are the two sides of the same coin. One cannot exist without the other, and that is what is fueling the growth and scale for AI so that it can diffuse across the society.
Okay, so taking from there, and Santhosh, let me bring you in terms of, as we were discussing, capacity building, compute, so on and so forth, can India also keep up with the pace of change and development in the West, given that AI is also extremely capital intensive? Do you see that being a reality here?
Yeah, I think, first of all, thank you for having me here. I think the biggest challenge that we have, I think, is like, if we try and mimic what's happening in the West, I don't think we're going to be successful, okay? Because we just think about it. In the last 6 months, there's $600 billion worth of capital that was invested in the U.S. on building data center and infrastructure in the U.S., and we spent about $3.5–4 million. So I don't think it's a comparison, because one is not just the amount of capital. I just think the Western model of data centers, which is heavy compute intensive, lots of huge, large infrastructure, I don't think we can support that, right? Because just take simple elements like power, or even simple elements like water. I mean, we are 18% of the world's population with 4% of the world's water. So if you build the same amount of data centers that the US is building into India, I don't think we can even sustain that from the resources that we have. So the solution does not lie in taking the Western model and applying it. The solution lies in building our own Frugal AI model that it goes support this whole journey in a different way. So I think we need to rethink infrastructure for us to be successful.
Okay, I think that's a great starting point for the conversation in terms of how to manage sustainability and how to really come up with our own models. Let's get you in on that, Ramesh.
Yeah, if I can add to that, right, I think Santhosh made a brilliant point. So India right now produces 20% of the world's data, but our data centers are capable of holding only 2% of the world's data at this point, right? So if we have to scale, we obviously need to increase our data center capacity, but it's super expensive. And not only from a resource perspective, but from a compute and electricity perspective. To run something like that, you need like 7 to 8 times of power that runs Bombay, right? The amount of compute electricity that you need. So it's going to be super expensive. So I think the key will be to have very specialized LM models that are built in India, for India. And also, I think we need a lot of jugaad here. Like, we need to be very frugal with what we do. I mean, we have built UPI, right? And the system runs, it runs more transactions than credit card transactions in the US, right? And it's free. So we need to figure out a way of reducing compute costs, reducing electricity usage. We recently did a model on building kind of like a financial manager for the masses. Like, so pretty much everyone should have a personal finance manager, like like including your cooks and your taxi drivers and all, right? Now to do something like this at scale, at this point of time, it would take around 300, 350 rupees to run the app and the solution, because a lot of the cost is in that inference, in the LLMs and stuff. But fast forward 3 years, I think it'll come down to 30, 40 rupees. Yeah, and it's just a matter of time, right? Yeah, and it's with the brilliance of obviously everyone in this forum, right? Qualcomm with cheaper chips, and Microsoft with better technology, Santhosh and his chips on stuff. It's just bound to happen.
Okay, I can see everyone's wanting to jump in here a bit more. So let me bring you in, Srini, because how ambitious is our plan to be self-reliant with the kind of progress you're making, the kind of supply we need when it comes to semiconductors? How ambitious do you think really that agenda is? Can we be self-reliant?
Thanks for having me, Aabha. Very glad to be here. It's a good question, the semiconductor value chain. I think if you look at the value chain beyond the IPs and design that India has been doing extremely well, if you look at the rest of the chain where you have a foundry, fabs, and wafer development, as well as the end product testing and assembly, I think there's a huge opportunity there. And I don't think it's too ambitious. It's doable. It's doable, right? If you look at, I've been had a chance to visit some of these companies who have started doing it. They're starting in a very right foot. So it needs to be invested a little bit more. I think the manufacturing part is a little bit more unforgiving if you don't do in the right way. So you have to not only do the manufacturing correct, and it has to be done consistently every day. If you don't do that one, then it's going to be very unforgiving. The yields are going to suffer, and you just lose the customers. So I think if you look at this value chain, the technology is moving fast. The way that both the industry as well as the government is doing it, do on a little bit of mature nodes where 75% of the semiconductor chips are being manufactured in those mature nodes. And that's you can negotiate with the existing vendors who are doing it and learn from what they have done, what their mistakes, and then start from there and then go with the technology. But the latest technology is very expensive and it's changing very fast. If you look at a decade and a half ago, every technology migration used to happen 3 to 4 years. Now it's happening less than 18 months. And it's very expensive also. So you need to be really cautious when you go there. So instead of going to the greatest technologies, where I think the value is very high, but it's very expensive, very complex and difficult. So we should learn from the mature tech nodes and start from there and go. And it's a huge opportunity for India to be a part of the global supply chain. And there's a lot of potential there, and I see a lot of things are going in the right way.
Okay. So, Himani, now Microsoft's made significant investments when it comes to AI capability building here in India. Share with us your experiences, whether it be in adoption, skilling, just the kind of impact or value that's been created. If you could just go a little deeper into your experience here.
Sure. So at the beginning of the year, we announced $3 billion in investments, which is to create infrastructure and future-ready talent. And we've actually been relentlessly executing that to increase the impact every day on that. So if you look at just from a skilling perspective, we committed that we will do 10 million people skilled by 2030, so 5 years. But since the beginning of the year, we are now at 5.6 million already skilled, which means more than 50% in less than a year what we committed for 5 years. So that's the skilling that we've already done, and we are doing it across all kind of groups. We are doing it with women learners. We are doing it with the civil servants. We're doing it across the groups of cohorts in the society because we really believe that needs to scale. So that's on the skilling side of it. Now, the impact of the infrastructure that's being created, right? We already have 3 regions live, 2 regions in partnership with Geo, which are live, and 1 region that's coming up very, very soon. So that's the infrastructure. How is it that our customers using it? And if you look at it right from grassroots, from the farms to the boardrooms, is what AI is impacting today. And if I can give you one or two examples, talk about an ASHA worker, right? An ASHA worker gets up at 5 a.m., does the house chores, then goes really in the narrow streets for hours to really spread that awareness. But they never had any tools. So we actually, Microsoft Research partnered and created a voice bot for them, which can actually help them with the multilingual, which is Hindi, English, all kind of languages, to really help them take notes, ask questions, and resolve the queries right there. And this, because it is healthcare, it is actually not just any LLM, etc. It's actually linked to the knowledge base, which is deep-rooted in India's problems. So if you look at it, it is how things, there are global models, but then they are being customized to the knowledge base that is here to really make an impact on the ground. Right? So that's just one example how the community, which is the most underprivileged community, which is getting really impacted with technology. On other end, and I was talking to Alok just before this, media, right? We just partnered with CAN, which is actually creating content with AI. So the entire movie-making episodes, the entire content, Mahabharata, is being created with AI and in partnership with Azure AI, and that is what they're doing with all the I got to watch it this weekend, and if you haven't watched it, you should actually see it. It is so real on what it is doing as an impact. So it's the technology and creativity coming together, which is a very, very beautiful blend. And there are so many other examples that we can talk about.
Of course, okay, we'll come back to that. So lots to look forward to and live examples there. Santhosh, of course, we're seeing a complete relook when it comes to the semiconductor space, lots of innovations in chip design, and you're leading the race there as well. How does India fit into that picture when you're looking at the kind of focus there is on chip production, on new innovation, on design?
Yeah, I think the first step is that this is a long journey, right? So I think chip making is one of the hardest things in the plant that anyone can do, because it's just complex and every little thing impacts. I mean, as you were mentioning earlier, like it's very expensive. An advanced node today costs you about $30 billion and 4 years of investment at a minimum to create an advanced node. And you're actually inventing technology as you build, because by the time you're in production, it's 5 years from now, and you've got to imagine what 5 years from now technology will look like. So it is a very complex process, and you're developing things at microscopic levels. I mean, we recently saw like some elephants walking created issues in one of the fabs that we were trying to build. I mean, we had a highway that was 50 miles away, and the trucks moving on the highway affects the foundation that we've got to build on a fab plant, right? So it's that complex because even the slightest vibration affects how production is. So the key is India being on the journey is the most important factor, because semiconductor supply chain is extremely important. If AI is everywhere, intelligence is everywhere, then you will have chips everywhere. And if chips are everywhere, you need to find a way that supply chain is we have some amount of influence on supply chain. So I think it's an important element that India is on. The key part that we have to start to think about is that we have to stay invested in that long journey. I think we get very impatient. We want to build unicorns in 1 year, 2 year. I think this is a 15-year, 20-year race that you have to play your part in. It's also important that we have to be real that demand is a big factor of some of these functions. And we may be a huge country, but we are small when it comes to semiconductor demand, okay? Because if you look at the global semiconductor demand, $650 billion of silicon, 500 billion is leading edge. We are probably at 20 billion, going to 100 billion, and your leading edge is less than 1% of what the global demand is. So we have to make inroads into demand side of the equation as well, because that's when supply comes and meets that part. So I think it's a long journey. We just have to stay committed onto it.
So, Ramesh, where do you think the biggest bottlenecks are? We've talked about capital, we haven't really talked about policy, but of course that's one part of it, access to infrastructure, tech readiness, adoption. What do you feel are the biggest bottlenecks right now?
I think the biggest bottleneck right now is capital flow. But like we have invested like 1.4, 1.5 the AI for India. Saudi Arabia is doing 100 billion, right? US is already invested close to 40, 50 billion dollars, both private and public, right? So we need to unlock capital coming into AI in general, Gen AI in particular in India. The government is doing a lot already, but I think we need to unlock more forms of investment into this. Even if you look at, I work with a lot of fintechs. I focus on BFSI. In fintechs, for example, in the US, if you are doing a fintech, you typically looking at a 15x kind of return. In India, it's 1.5x. So the money flowing into some of these startups that are doing very cutting-edge technology is limited in India, right, for various reasons. And that, in turn, curtails innovation and what can be done. Having said that, right, there are companies like Sarvam.ai that has come up. The government has been supporting them. The government has invested in these 38,000 GPUs, right, for public sector, for startups to work with. I think that's brilliant. The second is the skill gap. So 1 out of every 5 AI engineers is of an Indian origin, right? But they don't live in India, and they're not working on Indian problems. Only 2-3% of these are working in India and are working on Indian problems. So we need to solve for that also. That's, I think, one of those, retention of talent. And we always had this problem of brain drain. Now it is becoming even more apparent and obvious, right? So we need to figure out a way for us to retain a lot of the talent, or at least have them focus on India. And so, India is in like the global south, as we call it now, right, where we have India and a few other nations come. And then, so these are the two big things from a logistic point of view. Technology, I think we'll figure it out. I think in terms of usage, it's crazy. Now, we are the second largest user of Anthropic, right, in India, in the world. After the US, China obviously doesn't disclose the numbers, but after US, it's India. So those problems will solve, but the money has to flow. Yeah.
Okay. It always does come down to capital. So, but Srini, where are you think the 2 or 3 breakthrough areas that India can contribute significantly? When we're talking about the semiconductor value chain, perhaps beyond design, like where can we contribute? Where do you see some breakthrough areas?
So, as we talked about the value chain, the first and easiest, probably relatively easier. It's very complex, but relatively easier for the other compared to the testing, OSATs, ATP, assembly, test, and packaging areas that can be really useful. That's the area that we can easily contribute, and you can kind of a little bit master it, and you can deliver it. But the technology is also very fastly changing, very quickly changing. So you need to have to address this and make sure that we can get a good foothold on the ATP, and then get to the foundry aspects of it. I think those are the areas where you can invest and you can relatively with less of a capex compared to other stuff, and then also contribute and make a difference in the global chain.
What about on-device Gen AI? Because that's getting a big push as well. Tell us a little about that.
Yeah, it's very interesting, right? If you look at now, a lot of the, maybe a few years ago even, most of the AI stuff is running in a cloud. And then at some point, what every query costs 10 cents per, right? And if you ask for some simple question, it goes to the cloud and it goes to the server, and the amount of money spent on that query is around 10 to 15 cents or so. That's what I read. But, it's also a challenge about the privacy and what you want to ask and all that stuff. So there's no way, imagine that, we have 1.4 billion, even if 10% of the population start querying and ChatGPT or Gemini or Gopalan, there's no way we can sustain this kind of cost. It has to come onto the device close to you. One is it's a cost advantage, as well as it kind of gives you the privacy aspects of it. So, but the challenge now is these models are pretty large. They run on the clouds. They're very expensive servers. They run on it. And to migrate them to the device that's close to you, what you use in a smartphone or a device at your home, it requires quite a bit of change. So certainly there's a lot of investment going on, and the teams are doing it. The aspects that you look at is, one is the hardware aspect in terms of computational complexities and the constraints you have in these devices. These are devices are very small handheld devices. So the amount of hardware you can put in is limited. And hence it is requires to be, need to be optimized for it. Then the memory, the cost aspect is also, because you expect these small devices to be very cost optimal for everybody to buy. And then on top of it, you need to have a response time. If it takes a long time because it's running at slow or so small hardware, it's not user-friendly. User experience will suffer. So in consider all this stuff, we need to do some investments and all this stuff that has been done. So a lot of the times what we do is these large language models are very heavy. They are optimized to run on the device. So we can do some quantization. Instead of running in a big, long vectors, we can run it in smaller ones without losing the efficiency. Of course, there's some efficiency losses that happens, but then you need to be cognizant about it. And then you need to have smaller language models that Himani talked about earlier. Those can be on the device. So it can happen when those things are happening, you can make this on-device effectively get it. There are other techniques we use. We use a dedicated hardware, what we call neural processing units. Those can be used as well. So these kind of things that you can use on-device, I think is becoming more and prominent. Today, we can run almost 10 billion parameter model on a smartphone device that you can buy. So I see that certainly in a few years from now, maybe 50, 60, 70 billion parameters models, and then the models can be optimized to work on the device. So this kind of confluence of these two work and make the on-device and make it easy accessible to everybody.
All right. Super interesting, and I want to come back to Himani because yes, she did touch upon it, and I'd love to hear some more of those examples you were referring to, Himani, as well, because you must be just exploring so many various kinds of models and working with so many different stakeholders.
So, absolutely. Look, every organization today, if you're looking at it, is at a different phase of maturity, and they're looking at from a productivity perspective, from an operational efficiency perspective, from really reinventing the customer's experience, engagement, and all of it, and that's where they're using. So if I share some more examples, Bajaj Finserv, right? That is one of the most up there fintech company, which is actually a frontier firm, truly a frontier firm, completely on the agentic journey. They have this model and the agents created who are actually working now along with their people, and the entire loan approval and disbursal journey within the guardrails is happening, and there's approximately $45 million worth of loans monthly that are being dispersed with the help of the agents that are there. So that's the kind of journey that the customers are on. Look at some other examples, like we made a commitment that by 2025, we will be 100% renewable energy and carbon neutral by 2030. So we now have a partnership with AmPlus, which is Petronas subsidiary and is one of the largest rooftop solar installer in India. And we buy energy from them, but that's not just it. We're working with them to create digital sustainable platform, leveraging AI and analytics to track and monitor carbon emissions and improve on that. There are examples in government, like ONGC, for an example, SOE or a PSU, where they have Sarthi, which is actually built with AI, bringing the structured and unstructured data all together and improving the efficiency. And you talk about any industry today, there are enough and more examples across the domains, functions that people are using. Some frugal, people like us who are creating our own agents. My team has created agents for themselves, which is really helping them save time. There are agents which are being created by complex scenarios as well, where you need more intervention. But my ask to everyone is just go today and just try creating one agent for you, which can help you take the repeatable tasks away and really help you be more productive.
This is super interesting. I think the first panel was talking about this technology, and Himani is actually sharing live examples of it being used. So it really shows you how things are rapidly changing on ground, and we really can't stay away from it too much longer. Santhosh, demand is clearly there. Supply, we've talked about the constraints, and capital is clearly something that we still need to find solutions for. So do you see more manufacturing also happening here in India when it comes to chips?
I think it's part of the journey, right? I think design, we've all heard about the progress that we've made, and that's unquestionable. I think manufacturing, demand, supply chain security are all connected kind of topics. But, I think for India, we are at an advantage that we're probably one of those countries where, I've lived in 6 different countries before being here. And I've seen, I think we have the unique advantage because there is no place that digitization is available at scale as much as India is. Because you have solved the problem for identity, we have solved the problem for payments, because most businesses struggle by knowing who the person is and to see whether I can digitize the transaction with people. And I think that's the key that we have solved at scale. Okay, so it's even in the US, you have a social security number, but it doesn't have biometrics tied to it, right? So it becomes harder for them to go do things at scale. So I really think we have an advantage of scale that our country offers. But beyond pilots and nice to do POCs, we got to make AI real, okay? Because right now it's like one of those hobby projects, like it's a good PowerPoint to show, but it's not a good thing that changes your business. And I think the ownership on making this real is up to the audience and up to the business. And we have unique segments where we can make this real, right? Like education is a good example. It's a 200-year-old system that is built by the British for the information age, not for the intelligence age. In fact, built for the industrial age, right? Because it's one way, it's teaching, it's memorizing. My son is studying the same way I studied 20 years ago, okay? So I think there are sectors ripe for AI to be real, but those are the places that we got to go apply. So as Himani was saying, I think try it. If it doesn't succeed, move to the next. But find the ways that it really moves the business. Then I think all of the elements of supply chain will start to fall in place.
I think that's another really interesting takeaway from both the sessions in terms of value and really finding those sweet spots. Ramesh, in terms of cross-industry partnerships or public-private partnerships, how can we build a resilient infrastructure ecosystem here in India to see a thriving AI culture and adoption?
Yeah, I think this is one area I think we can learn some stuff from the US. A lot of things that are happening in the US is because of partnerships between seemingly competing companies, right? Like Google and Microsoft and all of them are now investing in each other in indirect ways, right? All for the overall good of whatever AI, Gen AI. I think that needs to happen a lot in India also. Not only in the private sector, but public. The public sector has taken a lot of strides in this. Recently I was traveling to Bangalore. I was traveling with my 2 small kids, and I reached the airport and I realized I did not bring my wallet. I don't have their IDs with me. And now the government is also investing in, for example, data sets for AI learning. RBI is now rolling out regulations and governance mechanisms. So I think all these are important, but then the collaboration between various entities is also more important, which is happening in India right now. Like the India AI mission has already done a lot of very interesting things, right? In addition to this, the data sets and also building the platform for AI. So, yeah.
All right, so closing comment, and Ramesh spoke about the brain drain earlier, but Srini, if I were to come to you, and when we're looking at more R&D out of India, what are some of the unique strengths of engineering teams here?
I think the passion that we see in the new college team members and then what we hire here, right? There are a lot of challenges with the OpEx and then the constraints of it, but they figured out a way. Like just the way we figured out during the COVID time, how did we connect the entire India to all this stuff, and the classrooms reach to the very remote villages. When we go to see these kids, very remote villages, no connections to the infrastructure, but they're able to use smartphone to kind of learn about stuff they're doing, education. So I think there's a huge opportunity, there is huge talent, and the talent has given, this technology has democratized the opportunity to them. And that's coming out, and we see day in, day out. I'm very, very confident that I think that we have a huge amount of opportunity, huge amount of success ahead of us.
Fantastic. I think this was a really power-packed panel. It was so wonderful to hear from each and every one of you the ways that AI is already being implemented, and also to hear, I think there was a silent confidence in all of your voices in terms of what's happening on ground and how you see the future evolving. Thank you so much. Exciting times ahead. A big round of applause for our panel. Thank you.
Thank you to all the panelists. I request all of you to please stay back while I also request Mr. Alok Nair, COO of This Is Today, to please come up on the stage and present a token of appreciation to all our panelists.